Representative Ted Lieu just backed Attorney General Pam Bondi into an absolute corner, slamming undeniable photographic evidence onto the congressional record and demanding to know exactly why she is protecting Jeffrey Epstein's most powerful clients.
Prince Andrew attended various parties with Jeffrey Epstein. Under the law Congress passed, you are allowed to redact photos to protect the victims of Epstein's sex trafficking operation. You redacted the photos of this victim's face because you were following the congressional law. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, that we redacted the victim's
Because you were following the congressional law, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You have now established that please put the photos back up, that we are looking at a sex trafficking victim. Under the Federal Victims Trafficking Protection Act, not only is Jeffrey Epstein guilty, but anyone who patronizes Epstein's operation is also guilty of a crime. That's why I find it absolutely despicable that you sought to protect Epstein's clients, like former Prince Andrew. Last July, you closed the case on Epstein's abusers. The July 2025 memo from your Department of Justice stated, quote, "We did not uncover evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties." These two photos, please put the photos back up. These two photos staring you in the face are evidence of a crime and more than enough evidence to predicate an investigation against former Prince Andrew. So I ask you, Attorney General Pam Bondi, why did you shut down this investigation last July, and why have you not prosecuted former Prince Andrew?
If you care at all about true government transparency, you need to look very closely at the explosive confrontation that just unfolded during this highly volatile session.
I don't believe you asked Merrick Garland these questions when he was Attorney General and set before
I agree with you.
You twice.
I'm reclaiming my time. I agree with you. I agree with you. During the Biden administration, I called for people looking at Epstein files. Merrick Garland dropped the ball, as did Attorney General Bill Barr, as did Alex Acosta, a whole string of failures. But you are in charge. You have the power to change things, to hold these men accountable, and you're doing the opposite. You're protecting them. So I want to move on to another man.
Can I answer
Donald
that,
Trump.
though?
I want to move on to another
question. Can I answer your question about protecting
You answered the question.
You're saying no. I love this.
Like former Prince Andrew, Donald Trump attended various parties with Jeffrey Epstein. I want to know, were there any underage girls at that party or at any party that Trump attended with Jeffrey Epstein?
This is so ridiculous, and that they are trying to deflect from all the great things Donald Trump has done. There is no evidence that Donald Trump has committed a crime. Everyone knows that. This has been the most transparent presidency. He's the one that asked that those files.
I'm reclaiming my time. I got your answer. You said there's no evidence.
Trump asked
Chairman, please stop the clock.
Stop
the clock.
The legislation. This is
Time
ridiculous.
belongs to the gentleman from California.
Okay. I'm going to put up another document from a witness who called the FBI's National Threat Operations Center, because I believe you just lied under oath. There is ample evidence in the Epstein file.
Don't you ever accuse me of a crime.
I believe you just lied under oath, and this is all on videotape. You said there's no evidence of a crime. I'm showing you, here is a witness statement who called into the
This specific hearing was laser focused on redacted evidence and a highly controversial Department of Justice memo from July 2025 regarding federal accountability. The tension in the room skyrocketed the exact moment Representative Lieu held up two real physical photographs of former Prince Andrew. Lieu established for the official record that Prince Andrew had attended various exclusive parties alongside the notorious Jeffrey Epstein. He then pointedly reminded Attorney General Bondi of the specific laws Congress had passed, noting that the Department of Justice was legally permitted to redact photographs strictly in order to protect the identities of the victims caught in Epstein's sprawling sex trafficking operation. Lieu forcefully made Bondi confirm that they had in fact redacted a victim's face in those specific photos because they were strictly following congressional law. Once Bondi answered with a simple affirmation, Lieu sprang the trap, declaring that the committee had just firmly established that they were actively looking at a legally recognized victim of sex trafficking under the Federal Victims of Trafficking and Violence Protection Act. Lieu made his stance crystal clear, passionately asserting that not only is Jeffrey Epstein undeniably guilty, but absolutely anyone who actively patronized his illegal sex operation is also fundamentally guilty of a severe crime. With that unshakable legal foundation laid, Lieu unleashed his absolute disgust, calling it utterly despicable that the Attorney General would actively seek to protect Epstein's high-profile clients, explicitly naming former Prince Andrew as a prime example. Lieu brought the receipts, pointing directly to the infuriating fact that just last July, Bondi's Department of Justice officially and quietly closed the sweeping case on Epstein's remaining abusers. He quoted verbatim from the devastating July 2025 DOJ memo, which coldly stated that federal investigators did not uncover evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties. Gesturing wildly to the photograph, staring them right in the face, Lieu argued passionately that these images were undeniable, physical evidence of a crime. He insisted they provided more than enough foundational justification to formally predicate a thorough criminal investigation against the former royal. Lieu demanded to know exactly why Pam Bondi deliberately shut down this massive investigation last July and why she has completely failed to prosecute individuals like Prince Andrew. Bondi immediately attempted to deflect the pressure, smugly suggesting that Lieu had not asked these exact same demanding questions of Merrick Garland when he previously sat before the exact same committee as Attorney General. But Lieu did not take the bait, reclaiming his time with sharp precision and shockingly agreeing with her assessment of the past administration. Lieu emphatically stated that during the Biden administration, he had actively called for authorities to look deeply into the Epstein files. He unequivocally stated that Merrick Garland severely dropped the ball, just as Attorney General Bill Barr had done before him, and just as Alex Acosta had catastrophically failed years prior. Lieu painted a grim, undeniable picture of a whole string of spectacular institutional failures spanning multiple different political administrations, but he immediately and aggressively pivoted the spotlight directly back onto Bondi. He fiercely reminded her that she is currently the one in charge, holding the immense power to finally change the trajectory of history and hold these men accountable, yet she is actively doing the exact opposite by fiercely protecting them. After thoroughly establishing the terrifying reality of these legal facts, Representative Lieu sharply shifted his fierce focus away from international figures and aimed it directly at a highly specific and incredibly powerful domestic individual. And if you believe the American public inherently deserves absolute, unfiltered transparency regarding these official governmental records, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now to support our continuing coverage. Lieu boldly announced that he wanted to discuss another man who was heavily and repeatedly featured all over the Epstein files, Donald Trump. Drawing a direct, uncomfortable parallel, Lieu stated that just like former Prince Andrew, Donald Trump had attended various exclusive parties alongside Jeffrey Epstein. Lieu then asked a blunt, chilling question, demanding to know if there were any underage girls present at that specific party, or indeed at absolutely any party that Donald Trump had ever attended with Epstein. Attorney General Bondi immediately went on the defensive, snapping back loudly that the line of questioning was completely ridiculous. She frantically accused the committee of desperately trying to deflect from all the supposedly great things that Donald Trump has accomplished. Bondi firmly and loudly insisted that there is absolutely no evidence whatsoever that Donald Trump has ever committed a crime, boldly claiming that everyone knows his presidency has been the most transparent in history, and quickly crediting him as the one who actually ordered the release of those very files. But Representative Lieu was absolutely unyielding, aggressively reclaiming his time from the gentleman from California and instantly dropping a massive evidentiary bombshell that completely silenced the room. Lieu flatly accused Attorney General Bondi of just lying under oath on live videotape. He pushed back incredibly hard against her sweeping claim that there is no evidence of a crime, officially introducing a terrifying new document into the public record. Lieu revealed a chilling formal witness statement from an individual who had explicitly called into the FBI's National Threat Operations Center. According to the documented evidence, this critical witness was a limousine driver who had personally driven Donald Trump around. The driver chillingly claimed to have overheard Trump speaking directly to Jeffrey Epstein on his cell phone, allegedly sounding so violently angry that he explicitly threatened to stop the limo and physically hurt Trump. The horrors documented in the statement did not stop there, as the witness also reported meeting a young girl who tragically claimed she had been directly raped by both Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. In a deeply disturbing and horrific twist, Lieu revealed that this same young woman later had her head blown off. He pointedly noted that law enforcement officers responding to that gruesome scene had explicitly stated that the fatal injury could not possibly have been a standard suicide. The absolute crux of Lieu's furious foundational argument was a staggering, undeniable failure of the entire federal investigative process. He declared with absolute certainty that no one, absolutely no one at the Department of Justice had ever bothered to formally interview this critical, explosive witness. Looking Bondi dead in the eye, Lieu demanded that the DOJ needs to formally interview this specific witness immediately. He passionately stated that while Jeffrey Epstein should absolutely rot in hell, so too should the incredibly powerful men who willfully patronized his despicable operation. Lieu reminded the completely silent room that as they sit there today, there are well over 1,000 recognized victims of this sprawling sex trafficking network. And yet the current Justice Department has not managed to hold even a single male patron accountable. With his time rapidly expiring, Lieu delivered a blistering, unforgettable final blow, telling the Attorney General of the United States, "Shame on you," and firmly suggesting that if she possessed any human decency whatsoever, she would aggressively resign her powerful position immediately after the hearing concluded. The exact moment Lieu's allotted time fully expired, the chaotic aftermath was incredibly revealing. Bondi frantically asked to respond, but instead of aggressively refuting the devastating claims about the completely ignored witness or the horrific allegations of violence and trafficking, she executed a massive, desperate political pivot. When eventually granted time by a deeply sympathetic colleague from Alabama, Bondi entirely ignored the Epstein files and instead launched into a prepared, aggressive attack on the crime rates currently happening in Lieu's home state of California. She passionately cited rigid statistics about criminal illegal aliens, reciting numbers of homicides, assaults, and burglaries supposedly stemming directly from California's dangerous sanctuary city policies, loudly claiming that the Democrats were the ones actually deflecting this frantic, terrifying pivot to a completely unrelated political issue was the exact defining moment that told every keen observer in the room everything they needed to know about exactly how severely Lieu's allegations had landed. When a wildly powerful official completely runs out of substantive factual ground to defend themselves against credible allegations of a massive federal cover-up, they immediately change the subject, and the entire room felt it. The truly terrifying reality of this situation lies in a massive procedural loophole that essentially allows deep corruption to silently flourish in plain sight. Under normal functioning circumstances, every single federal tip officially logged through the FBI's National Threat Operations Center must rigidly go through a mandatory process where the Bureau formally inputs the specific data and the Department of Justice is then supposed to issue a formal interview request. These essential checks and balances exist for a very specific reason, ensuring no single agency can ever quietly close a major federal file all by itself. However, there is exactly one dark bureaucratic path that manages to entirely skip both of these critical foundational safeguards. If investigators simply choose to deliberately leave the primary witness completely uncontacted, the Department of Justice can then issue a final closing memo directly. They quietly sign the official paperwork, and suddenly nobody in Washington ever asks the brave witness anything at all. Failing to explicitly contact a key foundational witness essentially allows a massive agency to completely close a federal investigation without any further outside review, and according to the chilling evidence presented, that is exactly what happened right before this explosive hearing, leaving a highly credible, deeply disturbing witness statement completely unexamined inside a federal database raises incredibly serious procedural questions that simply cannot be ignored. Think deeply about what absolutely had to be true for Representative Lieu to be able to legally say those horrifying things out loud on the congressional floor. He had to already be physically holding that official verified document in his hands. The specific witness statement explicitly referencing the FBI's National Threat Operations Center was definitely not something he just introduced speculatively out of thin air. He specifically named the exact federal intake channel, the primary heavily monitored tip line that regular citizens desperately call when they genuinely believe a major federal crime has occurred or is about to occur. A formal submission logged directly through that official system automatically generates a permanent, undeniable federal record. Someone out there made the terrifying choice to call, and someone officially gave a chilling, detailed statement to the authorities. And yet, according to the undeniable evidence passionately presented by Lieu, absolutely no one at the Department of Justice ever followed up with that incredibly brave person. This massive failure did not just happen under this current administration. It seemingly did not happen under the previous ones either, sitting right at the rotting center of a much longer, decade-spanning institutional failure. The deeply tragic history of the Epstein case is essentially a masterclass in bureaucratic judicial evasion. Jeffrey Epstein was first heavily arrested way back in 2006 Palm Beach, Florida. That initial case was heavily mishandled by local authorities before eventually moving to federal prosecutors in Florida, which horrifyingly led to a deeply controversial and shameful non-prosecution agreement. Thanks directly to that legally dubious deal, Epstein only served 13 pitiful months in a local county jail, and he was even granted luxurious work release privileges for an astounding 6 days a week. Disgustingly, the numerous victims were not even officially told about this legal agreement in advance, an action which a federal judge later legally ruled had directly and undeniably violated the Crime Victims' Rights Act. Lieu specifically named Alex Acosta during the intense exchange, the man who ultimately brokered that very deal, and he also pointedly named Bill Barr, who was serving as the sitting Attorney General when Epstein was finally arrested again in 2019 on severe federal charges in the Southern District of New York. As the entire world knows, Epstein tragically and mysteriously died in a federal detention facility that August under incredibly suspicious circumstances that a local medical examiner initially ruled a standard suicide. However, a highly respected forensic pathologist who was later hired directly by Epstein's own brother aggressively disputed that official ruling, explicitly citing physical injuries that were vastly more consistent with a brutal homicide. The Justice Department's own Inspector General investigated the detention facility and quickly found incredibly severe, catastrophic failures in basic supervision and security protocol, yet absolutely no one was ever criminally charged in connection with his mysterious, highly convenient death. Even under the leadership of Merrick Garland, the Justice Department only released heavily curated documents, but completely failed to file any new criminal charges against the numerous other powerful individuals heavily connected to the sprawling case. Lieu readily and openly acknowledged all of this massive historical failure during the hearing, making absolutely no attempt to defend Garland, flatly stating that he too had entirely dropped the ball. But what Lieu was fiercely pressing Bondi on was absolutely not just partisan history. He was entirely focused on the devastating July 2025 DOJ memo that was officially issued directly under her leadership, a sweeping document that formally and legally stated that federal investigators somehow found no evidence whatsoever sufficient to even open basic cases against uncharged third parties. That single terrifying memo brutally closed a door that desperate victims, tireless advocates, and a few dedicated members of Congress had been desperately fighting to keep open for nearly 2 grueling decades. The real-world impact of officially closing this sprawling case is almost too significant to measure for the surviving victims who have waited their entire lives for justice. The massive civil litigation surrounding Epstein's sprawling estate has consistently produced official court filings naming literally dozens of highly prominent individuals. Some of those powerful names appeared directly in the official flight logs for Epstein's private aircraft, while others were explicitly identified by weeping victims in heavily sworn depositions. While none of that constitutes automatic guaranteed criminal liability, and the strict legal standard for a successful federal prosecution is admittedly much higher than what easily appears in civil discovery, the July 2025 memo did not merely say the evidence was insufficient to eventually prosecute. It went drastically further, claiming there was absolutely no evidence sufficient to even open a basic predicate investigation. That is a vastly narrower, vastly more categorical legal statement, and it is exactly that horrifying definitive statement that Lieu challenged so directly by violently holding up photographs that he argued easily met the legal threshold. Bondi's desperate, frantic response to the sharp pivot regarding Donald Trump is incredibly worth examining closely, not necessarily for what she actually said, but exactly for how she frantically chose to say it. She completely and utterly refused to engage with the highly specific, chilling question about whether underage girls were physically present at the exclusive parties that Trump and Epstein attended together. Instead, she shifted immediately to a broad, sweeping character defense, aggressively calling the entire line of questioning completely ridiculous, loudly invoking Trump's various political achievements, and frantically pointing to his role in actually releasing the Epstein files. That specific point regarding the declassified files is carefully worth noting because it is technically true, but only in a highly narrow, deeply manipulated sense. Executive orders that were signed in early 2025 did technically direct the official declassification and release of certain specific documents related to Epstein, but that heavily publicized release has been incredibly selective from the start. Crucially, the July 2025 DOJ memo that officially and permanently closed, the entire investigative chapter came just a few short months right after that public release. Fierce critics have rightfully argued that ordering a highly publicized document release while simultaneously and quietly closing the actual criminal investigation is a brilliant, highly manipulative way of heavily appearing transparent while completely foreclosing any real, actionable legal accountability. Lieu brutally called that exact manipulation out on the floor, summarizing it in 3 devastating, unforgettable words. You're protecting them. He had said it directly about Prince Andrew, and he repeated that exact same structural legal argument regarding Donald Trump. Whether or not an individual entirely accepts the specific horrific accusations that Lieu was aggressively making on the floor, the chilling pattern of protection he vividly described is a completely factually documentable reality. Multiple high-ranking attorneys, generals spanning across multiple different political administrations, actively chose not to pursue the powerful people repeatedly named in connection with Epstein's sprawling, monstrous operation. That is absolutely not a partisan allegation. It is the cold, hard, official record of the United States government. What nobody in that tense room actually said out loud, but what heavily hung over absolutely every single fiery exchange, is just how incredibly difficult these specific types of cases actually are to successfully prosecute in a federal courtroom. Massive federal prosecutions involving impossibly wealthy and heavily powerful defendants require incredibly brave victims who are genuinely willing to publicly testify, corroborating forensic evidence, strong enough to somehow survive brutal cross-examination, and an ironclad chain of custody on sensitive documents that has miraculously survived years of endless litigation and aggressive counter-litigation. Epstein's dark network was extraordinarily well-resourced, and his legal teams over the years heavily included some of the absolutely most skilled, ruthless defense attorneys in the entire country. The shameful 2008 agreement was absolutely not simply a mere act of lazy negligence or standard corruption, though many have passionately argued it was heavily both. It was also the tragic product of a brutal legal fight that federal prosecutors genuinely believed they might actually lose in front of a jury. None of that dark legal reality excuses what actually happened to those victims, but it partially explains why Bondi's frantic pushback, however deeply evasive it clearly appeared in that room, was not entirely without a twisted sort of bureaucratic logic. When she flatly stated that there is no evidence, she may have been carefully using the term in a highly technical, rigidly prosecutorial sense rather than a normal colloquial one, knowing perfectly well that standard surveillance photos of two people at a party do not technically by themselves constitute guaranteed, undeniable evidence of criminal conduct. That cold legal distinction is terrifyingly real, even when it feels deeply physically unsatisfying to the countless victims and to the outraged public watching those exact photographs flashed on the screen. But Lieu fully knew this legal reality, which is exactly why his brilliant response was not to waste time arguing about technical legal standards, but instead to explosively introduce the entirely ignored witness statement, introducing a formal statement from a limousine driver regarding entirely unexamined claims and a completely uncontacted witness fundamentally changes the entire game. If a witness voluntarily and bravely contacted the FBI's official tip line to report horrific crimes, and absolutely no one in the entire government ever followed up, that is fundamentally not a legal judgment call. That is a catastrophic failure of basic fundamental investigative process. Whether that staggering failure represents basic negligence, deliberate political avoidance, or some incredibly dark thing in between, is the ultimate question that this explosive exchange does not and cannot fully answer. It is the exact question that will violently follow this specific hearing into absolutely every subsequent news cycle, fueling every single follow-up request and every aggressive oversight letter sent from the Judiciary Committee directly to the Department of Justice. Calling for Bondi's immediate resignation on live television in the final fleeting seconds of his time was a massive statement, serving as a permanent marker, telling every single viewer watching exactly how seriously these institutional failures must be legally taken. This entire historic hearing leaves us grappling with one massive, lingering question. Will the Justice Department ever finally reach out to this completely uncontacted witness, or is the broken system simply going to look the other way yet again? I really want to know what you deeply think about all of this massive procedural failure, and if you believe true accountability is still possible here, drop your detailed thoughts down in the comments below. And if you truly appreciate this kind of straightforward, completely transparent, and deep dive breakdown of these critical official hearings, please make sure to hit that like button and absolutely ensure you subscribe, as it is the absolute best way to directly support the channel so we can keep bringing you the unfiltered truth.